Good morning and afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to day 2 of our Nonprofit Youth Services Talent Management Summit with today's session, Nonprofit Hiring, Ramping Back Up After COVID. My name is Max Smith, and I'm the Communications Director for 501c Services. We are a 100% employee-owned company that provides full-service unemployment outsourcing programs, as well as a few other services, to more than 3,000 nonprofits worldwide. Our programs include the 501c Agencies Trust and 501c HR Services, which is a confidential HR resource, not a call center, that's available to help nonprofits walk through difficult personnel issues. Many of you on today's call are already working with us, and we really appreciate you for doing so. I have a couple of housekeeping items to get through to answer some of your initial questions before I hand it off to our panel. If you have questions for the panel, please send them to us as we go. You don't have to wait till the end. Our moderator, Benjamin, will pepper the program with your questions as we go. So do not hesitate to send those questions in. If you're here for HRCI and SHRM credit, you all know how that works. You owe me a post-event survey, so I know what credit to send you. That will pop up once we're done today. It'll also be included in the post-event email, which goes out about an hour after we're done. In that post-event email, there will also be a recording of today's session, so you can watch it again or pass it around to your friends and family. Makes a great birthday gift. And if you're not aware, we have one more session tomorrow, and you can register for that at 501c.com TM Summit. Today is day 2 of 3, and we have one more day tomorrow. So having said that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it off to our panelists, our panel today, and our moderator, Benjamin Friedman. Ben is the CEO of Weiser Innovations. Weiser is the talent acquisition partner of 501c Services. Good morning, Benjamin. How are you?
Morning, Max. Doing well. Thank you for the introduction and for allowing us the opportunity to talk about ramping back up after COVID. Thank you. So what I'd like to do to get started is give each one of the panelists a minute or two to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some question and answer and talking about this great topic. So let our panelists jump in and tell who they are.
I'll go first. So my name is Kim Chochon. I am with Sterling and also represent the nonprofit division of Sterling, Sterling Volunteers. And I've been with the company for over 5 years, and really I am a trusted advisor within the background screening space, not only for volunteers, but employment background screening.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. My name's Gretchen Deaton. I'm the VP of People Experience and Engagement with the YMCA of Greater Kansas City. In our world, that means I'm responsible for culture and engagement, recruitment, internal communications, training, and leadership development. And I've really been in the people services world for about 5-6 years, but I was in marketing prior to that, and have been with the Y for, I just celebrated 31 years last week, so.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then, Kim, would you like to finish up the intros, please?
Sure. Hi, I am Kim Willis, and I am a senior recruiter consultant with Weiser Innovations. I have been a recruiter for about 15 plus years, and I have to work with agencies, profit. And I really enjoy the interview process, building relationships, and connecting great candidates to great opportunities.
Excellent. Well, I am glad that we are all here, and let's get started. And I think, you know, to get started, if we can start it with Gretchen, give the first question to you. So how does an organization proactively make the determination of whom to hire, understanding that external conditions, funding, COVID, and the variants of it, remote work, are still very much in flux.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what we're doing right now is we're just closely monitoring. Well, let me back up a little bit. So at the start of the pandemic, we just obviously, like a lot of organizations, cut back to the bare bones. And so what we're doing is closely monitoring enrollment in programs and membership. And as those enrollments increase, we're letting loose, I guess, some dollars for hiring. So it's really based off the enrollment numbers, and strategically, we think we've figured out like maybe what our trajectory will be, especially as things open up. But that's our core piece of it. We really, like all organizations, we also are giving people internally opportunities who may want more hours or explore a new career opportunity, because there has been a change in the position that they had pre-COVID. So we're recruiting both internally and externally constantly with regards to that. So that's my answer to that question.
Excellent, thank you. And I think it's great that it's both a external and internal process. So Kim C, to differentiate, obviously, hiring is one way to go, but volunteers are another great resource for organizations. So how can volunteers be leveraged in lieu of or as a supplement to seasonal hiring?
Another great question, of course. So when you first think about volunteers and how they serve during a disaster, typically when the disaster hits, volunteers run towards it and they want to help in any way, shape, or form, right? Well, in the case of COVID, everyone had to stay away. And at the height of pandemic, we saw many organizations have to restructure, as Gretchen alluded to, their staffing positions and change some of those roles into non-paid volunteer positions. And the main reason for this was, budget cuts and furloughs. And so the interesting thing is that organizations are continuing to have these non-paid volunteers in employee positions even as we start to reopen. So in the case of supplementing staff and with volunteer engagement, to leverage a volunteer in lieu of a seasonal employee, you'll want to reevaluate really each position and determine if it will remain the same or if there will be any changes. For example, will the shifts change, days of week? Will the number of hours? Is it serving a vulnerable position? Meaning, would the volunteer be dealing with any financials or working with a vulnerable population and really identifying all areas of vulnerability in your organization? And so when you also involve volunteers in a more meaningful way for different opportunities, not only the traditional volunteering opportunities, but for what typically was a paid position, you're actually benefiting the community because it helps enhance your mission and your business when volunteers are involved, and leveraging them to take on more important roles within your organization not only adds value to the recruitment and retention of volunteers, which we know are two huge challenges within the nonprofit sector, but it also equates to individual satisfaction. And so we know that volunteers are passionate about giving their time to causes and missions that are important to them. And as long as you provide that feedback and recognition for any volunteer, whether it's replacing a paid employee or a true non-paid volunteer position, it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And Kim W., so obviously for some roles, you do need to hire, you do need to bring people in. And as we're looking at right now with summer programs kicking up and the need for seasonal staff, what are some high volume, low cost avenues for sourcing candidates that can help with that seasonal hiring or just hiring in general?
Well, one way that can be done and to piggyback off of Kim C is the utilization of volunteers. Have you had some opportunities to work with some fabulous volunteers that already have the skill set and are familiar with your particular position? Approach them and see if they'd be willing for a seasonal opportunity. If they're not, do they know of anyone else that would? Oftentimes, some of your best referrals come from some of your best volunteers and employees. Go deeper into your own staff and let them know that you are about to do seasonal hiring. And do they have any friends, family, coworkers, people in alumni groups that are looking for these particular opportunities? If possible, may even share like a small referral program if you can. So maybe a great incentive for the internal employees to bring new people on board, or again, for seasonal people on board. A lot of times, go where that particular candidate is at. Right now with social media, there's a lot of engagement in building relationships with Facebook pages, having a brief conversation on Twitter, just talking about what your organization does, how excited you are about the opportunities that are becoming available, and generate a dialogue. You don't necessarily have to have the posting right away, but you can begin to build relationships, collect resumes, and contact opportunities while you're doing that. Also with some of the more bigger avenues such as Indeed and LinkedIn, again, find a way to tell a story. You don't need necessarily to have a posting just yet, but if you do have a page created on that particular opportunity, just make a few statements or two about your organization and your seasonal opportunities, how you're looking forward to meeting people and different opportunities that you have available.
Excellent, excellent. All great avenues. And so to further that conversation, going back to you, Gretchen, as summer is typically a season that requires many seasonal employees for nonprofits providing services for youth or other populations, how do you determine seasonal hiring needs, knowing that historical data may not necessarily be an applicable metric this year?
Yeah, so for us, our biggest areas are in summer day camp, lifeguards, and then some of the center program areas like sports and swim lessons. So the ones that are based off of enrollment, again, we have a pretty good idea in terms of ratios. Sometimes that's required by licensing, and sometimes we just know swim lessons are better when you have 6 people versus 10. So that's how we determine the needs. With regards to how many staff that we need. Referring back to the previous question too, we do continue to, try to recruit within. As Kim said, we're doing some referral bonuses right now, some hiring bonuses in super difficult positions like lifeguards where we have a gap. We have a summer last summer where nobody was trained, so there's a huge gap there with that. We also are sending out now information to people who worked for us pre-COVID and trying to that have not returned yet, and trying to recapture them. But on the whole, we really look at first off, and I guess the third piece of that we're really working with our teams on is scheduling. We were pretty pre-COVID, we were pretty good, like somebody always worked 4 to 6 every week on Thursday. And now we're really asking our staff and their leaders, to work with teams and see, can they work more hours? Can they be more flexible for those summer programs like that?
Excellent, excellent. And I'm going to bounce over to Kim W. now. So once hiring levels are determined and we know who we need to hire, we know how many people we need to hire, how do you incorporate and ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion goals are properly met when you're in a high volume, high pace hiring process?
Well, you definitely want to incorporate that data for your seasonal hires within your plan. So the seasonal hires, even though it's just seasonal, should not be separate from your overall diversity and equity and inclusion program. Ensure that everyone that's going to be involved in interacting with those seasonal employees, particularly anyone that's going to be involved in any interviewing, gets involved in unconscious bias training, gets opportunities to go through the organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. But how do you go about doing that in interviews? How do you go about asking questions and ensuring that your questions are equitable and fair across the board? How do you ensure that you are scheduling interviews correctly, that you are reaching out to candidates that's in a fair and unbiased manner. Go within yourself. I think a lot of times, particularly when we're in positions, we think, what do we need to do for the position? We move professionally. But you also are an individual. You are a human being who has your own maybe unconscious bias that you may need to observe for yourself. So I like to encourage people to take a few moments for yourself. Jot down things that you think that you may or may not know. Reach out to other people and other teams on that particular space and in your people in equity space, on your human resources space, and ensure that you're open and having open communication and conversation about how you'd like for this process to be.
Thank you, Kim. Seems got a little technical glitch in there, but I'm glad we got that information through. Along with the hiring, and once you have identified the people that you need, once you have started that hiring process, and I'm going to pose this question to Kim C, is how do you manage a background check process, currently during a COVID time, to ensure that you're running quality checks along with that COVID testing, as safety, is really a holistic concern right now.
Absolutely. I mean, reevaluating your background screening program should really be done on an annual basis. So the question becomes, were you running a quality check prior to the pandemic? Background checks can be complicated and vary state to state, and federal laws are continuously changing. So how do you know if you had a background check in place, and if you didn't, how can you put one in place? So I just want to review some key questions you can ask your current provider that will help determine if you are running a quality compliant check so that you're really maximizing at creating safer environments. And just a few of these questions. One, if you're serving a vulnerable population, you're going to want to ask if your background checks include checking the National Sex Offender Public website. This is a free database search, and it's the most comprehensive real time. That should be the fundamental piece of a quality background check. Next, you're going to want to ask what jurisdictions does the databases cover that's in your check. Are you just covering state? Are you covering nationwide, et cetera? That's very important. You go to the county courthouse. That's at the core of safe screening because that's where the most updated records are kept. You're also going to want to make sure that your checks are compliant with the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA. That's a whole nother topic that I won't go into, but you want to ask that question. What's the average turnaround time for your background check? If your checks are coming back within 3 minutes, that typically is a red flag, and that's usually a non-compliant, high-risk, cheap check. And then you want to know, what happens when there is actually a hit of a criminal record? What's the process? You want to make sure that you follow, if you don't rehire or hire an employee or have a volunteer become eligible, then you want to make sure that you follow that adverse action process that the FCRA it requires organizations to do. And then lastly, you want to know what types of criminal records are viewed as not applicable to the position at hand. So in addition to that, you're going to want to fold in COVID testing as that additional safety measure. We know all too well the havoc that it's wreaked within the last 12 plus months. And then lastly, some people think that background screening is expensive, but it doesn't have to be to get that quality check. And one of my favorite quotes is by former U.S. Attorney General Paul McNulty, and it's, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So you just want to ensure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's and putting a quality compliant screening program in place as we move forward into restoring our operations.
Excellent. Is it possible for you, Kim, to just repeat the names of the specific databases that are important for organizations to be aware of as they are running the background check?
Sure. NSOPW, that's the DOJ's National Sex Offender Database. The Nationwide, which just throws a wide net across the country, and as it settles down, it'll cover most jurisdictions, but not all. So because of that, you just think about layering your check as a piece of Swiss cheese. So the more you layer, the more gaps you cover. So in addition to those two, you want to go to the current county courthouse. That's where the most updated records are kept. And then some will add in the OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which is the terrorist watch list, the no-fly list, the drug trafficking. Not all people or not all organizations use that, but it's a nice safety measure. And then lastly, what we do at Sterling Volunteers is we provide those free monthly updates, because you would be surprised at what is caught after the volunteer or individuals start serving. Now, employees, you can't really do those due to compliance reasons, do those monthly updates, but with volunteers, you absolutely can. And then if you really want to go deep, a Social Security trace, which allows to check multiple addresses of where the person lived. The industry standard is 7 years back. And so that will allow for a deeper, more comprehensive background check.
Excellent. Excellent. And just to clarify, with the background checks, obviously you said with the volunteers, you can be doing that monthly. Are there other differences that organizations need to be aware of with regards to an employee, whether it's a full-time or part-time versus a volunteer?
There are, and I could take a couple hours talking about this, but it really depends on the sector. I mean, if you think of healthcare, it's vastly different than youth sports. Or even in faith-based education. So there's certifications and verifications that are also required of employee hiring versus volunteer that sometimes don't necessarily have those same requirements. If you think of I-9, which applies to employees and not volunteers. So again, it's a lot of information to share on this call, but I welcome anyone with a follow-up. If you just want an education, I'm more than happy to do that, as we're, a trusted partner of 501c3.
Excellent. Excellent. And another question on this topic. This is a great topic, and I appreciate the questions that are coming through. So regarding the criminal background check, it was the Office of to check the records for the violent crimes, not the DOJ. So is there another one?
Clarification, the OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, is not the violent crimes. It's the no-fly list. It's the terrorist watch list. Okay. It's a government watch list. To capture those violent crimes, that's the criminal background check that you get with the layered search when you're checking, like doing a nationwide and going to the current county courthouse records. So those are where those records are kept. And then if you kind of think of a white collar crime like espionage or et cetera, that would be a federal check. So again, I mean, there are 80 plus background products and services that are out there. So it's impossible to capture everything for you all, because I don't know what your needs are, your specific needs are, and what sector you're in. But there is variances across the sectors and requirements, and depending on what state you're in. So again, I highly encourage, even if you're just curious or just want an education, more than happy to help.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate the comprehensiveness, because I know this is such a critical area. Like you said, if you think, compliance is expensive, see what happens when you're not. And as we're talking about, backgrounds, and as we're background checks, and we're talking about safety, I want to bring the next question to Gretchen, because I think this is it's really important given the times that we're living in. And as we're seeing, restrictions vary from state to state, municipality to municipality, but knowing that youth are not vaccinated and can't at this time, I mean, hopefully within the next couple of months, we're going to see, for 12 to 16-year-olds, And I saw something yesterday that possibly, 2-year-olds, filling the gap by September, which would be amazing. But obviously, we're not there yet, and we still need to operate. So knowing that the youth are not vaccinated and can't be at this time, how do you address that concern when hiring in-person direct support team members? And can you also, in your answer, speak to requiring vaccinations for employees as well as new hires?
Sure. So, for the Y in Kansas City, we are not currently requiring vaccinations for new associates or current associates, but we do highly recommend it, and we do provide a number of opportunities for new associates and current associates to get vaccinated. In fact, our Y, because of our health partnerships, has been supporting vaccination in the community. I think we've run through 12,000 people in the last 6 weeks in our centers where they're actually getting vaccinated. So we've been able to offer that opportunity to everyone. We, especially in our childcare areas, so whether that was at the beginning of the pandemic, we offered childcare for essential service families who were working either in healthcare, to delivering groceries. We offered the essential childcare, and I would tell you that our safety protocols are both stringent and implemented at a very high level. We had no COVID cases in any of our essential childcare programs last summer, or in summer day camp that we offered last summer too. So we do require masking. We do require, as much as possible, we try to recognize the social distancing in those programs. We try to help our staff maintain that social distance as much as possible, unless they're having to do, some sort of corrective interaction or redirection. Where we also, every COVID case that has come up since the fall, we do our own tracing in addition to what our health department requires too. So we continue to do that and continue to communicate not only what vaccination opportunities are available at the Y through the Y's partners, but also in the community to do that. And right now, we cover a 9-county area. Every county and some cities and towns have their own COVID requirements. We have decided that we are going to go with the highest or probably most conservative COVID requirements, safety protocols, mask wearing, and all of that until they all kind of lower. It's been our association's perspective on that. So we'll continue to work through that.
Excellent. Yes, because I know that's definitely something that's a concern to parents. It's a concern, obviously to, frontline workers as well as the administration. Do want to keep people safe.
So one thing, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
One thing we left out was, so every time we have had a COVID, either exposure or where, perhaps a child in the school year has had COVID, we send a letter to everybody and we contact. So number one, we don't just leave it to a letter or an email, but we phone call anybody who could have been exposed. We start with that, and then we send something to the entire group, whether that's a program or at a membership center, all the members, that this has happened. And here's the time that they might have been exposed in case we miss someone. So we're really trying to be transparent in our communication about COVID. And what we've seen is that that provides some confidence. I would tell you early on, I think, as people were, as we were learning more about COVID, but now I think that really provides some confidence in our transparency. Yep, here's some things that have happened, but here's what we've done to mitigate it, and that whatever we'll be following the guidelines in terms of whatever, staying away. I can't think of the word right now, but so okay.
No, excellent. And I, as a parent myself, I definitely appreciate knowing that there are these procedures in place to let people know, because you can be as diligent as as anything, but we all know, especially when you're working with kids, kids sneeze, kids touch one another. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
So having that level of support and communication is really great. And so moving back to the hiring process, and as we have modified how we hire now, and things aren't as in person as they used to be, and we are leveraging technology more and utilizing virtual interviewing. So Kim W., since virtual interviewing is an integral part of the hiring process, what training is needed for staff to successfully perform this, and what resources should be presented to candidates to ensure technology does not impede their success in the hiring process? This way, it's not a situation where somebody who may or may not have access to a video camera gets left out.
That is true. That's very true. And I think one of the first things is the team needs to decide how they are going to approach virtual interviewing. In the past, if you've had several steps in the interviewing process, now with virtual interviewing, are you going to eliminate maybe a step or two to kind of make it easy, not only for yourself, but also for the candidate, make a little bit more of an easier flow, and what each step will look like? I think it's really important too, before you even move into that space, is to find out if your organization's IT and or help desk can support different virtual opportunities. Can they support Office Teams? Can they support Skype? Can they support Zoom? Do they have staff that understand how those particular mediums work? And if so, can they lead the trainings? And if not, what do you need to do to pull people in for those sort of trainings if you're going to be using those particular tools? So I think that's really important as well, to kind of have some of those foundations in place first. If you do decide that you're going to move forward with virtual interviewing, and in particular, if you're going to move forward with Zoom, you want to ensure that the candidates that you're working with do have that opportunity. It's really challenging, and I think we've all shared that, Kim, as well as Gretchen, as we're moving through COVID. And I'm here in Michigan. There aren't a lot of libraries, co-working spaces where candidates can go and do these sorts of things. So I think it is fair and prudent upon us as agents of HR to ensure that the candidates we're selecting do have avenues to do that if we're selecting that. And if they don't, then what do we need to do to ensure that that candidate has a fair and equitable chance at this particular opportunity? And all candidates. So if you find that in your pool of candidates, there's one that cannot do Zoom, then all should not do Zoom. Or if there is one that can do MS Office Teams, but one other, then they should all do the same medium, so that you're ensuring that you're approaching them all in a fair process. And there are some places that you can work with in some particular cities and counties that are, particularly some work force spaces, that are allowing candidates to go in and utilize some systems for free. So I think that's also another step. If you are going to go with that particular medium for virtual, find out if the candidates that you selected to interview are available or have that sort of access to that. Next, I think it's really important to go really in depth with the process. I'm really am big on candidate experience, and from the beginning all the way to the end, if they're getting selected and through to onboarding. With this particular process, I think we have to be even more detailed and even more clear in what we're doing. So how we're going to send out the links, what system are we going to use? Will we give them an opportunity to do testing? I also think in this particular situation, it would be fair to share questions while we're in the virtual space, so that the particular candidate can see these questions as you're moving through them. Not so much giving them an extra prep, but just giving them an extra sense of comfort as we're going through the process, that they if audio goes out, that they may still be able to see their screen until we work that out. So I do think that's really important. Introduce them to the team, particularly if you're doing a panel. Start off that interview in a very comfortable space. Even if it's one-on-one with the phone, I ask someone, how are you doing today? How are things going today? Is this still a good time to talk? And I think that is also fair things to do in this particular virtual space, because this is all new for us and we're all learning and working together. For the team, I think it's important to understand how you're connecting with audio, and make sure that you understand how the candidate is connected with audio. Is it in immediate space? So some systems, as we know, the moment you connect, you're on. but do they need to actually select in their settings how they're going to speak, how they're going to hear you, how you're going to communicate, and do we need time to figure those sorts of things out? It's definitely still a learning process, and I think that oftentimes when you move through certain opportunities and you're done with that, it's also important to get back with the team and talk about what went right and what went wrong, and kind of pull together some best practices as we're moving through this COVID opportunities right now.
Excellent, excellent. And a question came in that I'm going to direct back to Kim. You know, so is there a creative way to make an individual organization stand out when you are dealing with shortages of a specific type of candidate, like an hourly candidate or a candidate that does a certain type of role? You know, are there things that you can do as a talent acquisition professional or as an organization as a whole to help overcome that, that shortage of, workers in the market or applicants to your position?
One of the first things that comes to mind is I think we're in a unique space right now that we could really take even more advantage of social media and tell a story. I think a lot of us are very used to an ABC and 1, 2, 3 structure of how you talk about your available opportunities. And we also go to the same pools, if you will. So I'm looking for an hourly person, so let's go to the group that normally has hourly candidates. If I'm looking for a marketing person, let's go to a group that normally talks about marketing. But there are communication specialists and public relations specialists that don't have a background in marketing, but may not be actually doing it. And we're missing a chance to talk to them. Oftentimes we are missing an opportunity to connect with our community as to how fabulous our organization is, how we're serving the community, how we're serving a particular set. And I think the story can do that. And even better, if you've had someone in that role, or if you currently have someone in that role, let them be the catalyst for that story. What's their strength? How have they been able to connect with someone? And it doesn't have to be very long. It could be a quick few sentences, or it could be a very short video. And I think that's incredibly effective, particularly on your personal website, if you have a Facebook page. And then again, I think with Twitter, again, people hear Twitter and they think politics, but Twitter can also be a wonderful way to start the conversation about what it is the organization has and what you have to offer.
Excellent. And, I'm going to open this part of it, for any ideas, but are there certain things you can do in certain geographies that would make a difference? For example, if you're in the Bay Area versus Kansas City or, versus, Texas, so if I'm looking to bring in candidates and I'm in the Bay Area, what are some things I can do there versus some things that I can leverage in a different geographic location? Are there, do we have any thoughts?
So I can share some. We are like many. We are really working hard to hire staff right now, especially at the numbers that we need. So we also work with community partners. We have done that for years. Now we're looking at some of those community partners, and in fact, some other nonprofits, and saying, hey, we know that you're not fully up to speed yet. Neither are we in this area. Do we think we could together come up with a full-time job for somebody, or more than get them to that 40 hours or that 30 hours that they want by working at both places, and so kind of recruiting from each other. We're looking at things like that to try to do it. We continue to do the job boards. We are in close contact with all the colleges and universities in our area. We do probably, I'm sure this is the same in all areas of the country. There's some things that our media does, our TV media does. We do a lot on Facebook and Instagram in particular. Kim, when you talked about Twitter, we need to be braver about that. So that was a great thought with that. But, I think regionally for us, it's really about having those partnerships and having some people we can call up and say, hey, we're really looking for this person. I will tell you that also our DEI partners, some of our work with veterans and things have been very helpful for us as we're trying to search for employees right now.
Excellent. I think that the partnership is great. It's definitely something that I've used nationally. Leveraging workforce development organizations has been, it's a huge tool. If for no other reason than that the members that are going through that program are motivated to work. So that's definitely a great resource, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, Gretchen. I think that's a tremendous tool that a lot of us don't automatically think of, but it's right there, and we should take advantage. We should have that partnership. So thank you. So one of the strategies that was brought up earlier is re-engagement and hiring members that may have been furloughed or may have been laid off. So I'm going to ask Kim C., what recommendations would you make with regards to reemployment background checks and people that, unfortunately did have to leave the organization for whatever reason some months back because of, the environment beyond our control?
Right. So, we ask that question a lot, and we know that during the pandemic, it really turned the nonprofit sector upside down. But at the same time, if you think about it, it presented the opportunity to reevaluate the staffing levels and business models, which then presented the opportunity for nonprofits to reset work expectations and reevaluate their staff, right? So when you're rehiring or reinstating employees and reevaluating your screening program, hiring managers will want to plan carefully to avoid some legal hazards as the determination is made of who will return to work and what to include in those reinstatement letters. There should also be a detailed return to work plan in place for returning employees and even really the volunteers included in that plan if a background check will be required to be run again. And if the position will be in person, will it be virtual, will it be a combination? And really being transparent to help regain that trust that may have been lost as a result of the furlough will help if you have a designated plan in place. But specifically regards to background checks, as a best practice, of course, if budget allows, it is recommended to run a new background check at the time of rehire or recalling that employee back into the workforce. And again, it depends on the sector and the exact position and on what level of check to run. But for example, if you're serving a vulnerable population, then yes, 100% run a new background check, because who knows what happened in this past year while they're working from home in possibly an unstructured environment, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same level of check that as your initial one, but it will help mitigate risk as you move forward to reestablish a safer environment, protect your assets, safeguard your reputation, et cetera. And for example, if you ran a fingerprint check initially on an employee, you don't necessarily have to run another one when they re-enter, but consider doing a name-based check, like like I mentioned previously, and doing those name-based checks doesn't necessarily break the bank, because there's all different levels of checks that you could run. And then lastly, you should really consult with legal counsel just to make sure that your background screening checks pre and post COVID are compliant, and because some laws may have changed as a result of COVID. So you just want to make sure you're up to speed with that. And then also check with your benefits provider, because they might have a checklist of to-dos and what not to-dos. And in helping you reinstate these employees, and I think that would be very beneficial. And then one last little thing, I referred to our partnership as 501c3, and I meant to say 501c services. If I had $1 for every time I mentioned that, I'd be in Hawaii right now.
Not a problem, not a problem. So I do have a final question, that I would like to share with everybody. If you want to take, about 2 minutes to answer it. So with all the challenges and changes over the past year and a half as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, can you speak to the best silver lining that you found? Because with every negative, there are positives. So let's end on that high note and really, speak to that. And I'll say, Kim, W, if you want to go first, and then we'll just, move through.
One silver lining that I've experienced, and I think this backs up to Kim C, is volunteers have stepped up enormously. Volunteers already do. I think volunteering is inherent. It is within you, really, to want to give like that. And I think since COVID has started, there have been a lot of employees, I think, that we've all experienced, friends, family, that due to other friends, family, or your own personal situation, you've had to stop working. And I have seen volunteers step up and do some incredibly amazing things. Learn more about job responsibilities that they've never done before, taking on opportunities maybe that they haven't done in the past, and so they're coming back to do things. Retirees who are willing to come back and be of service. And so I've really been warmed by the way people are stepping up to be of assistance for other people who've had to leave out for COVID.
Excellent, thank you. And what if we stay with Kim's, and Kim C, you go next, and then Gretchen, you finish it up for us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really simple because we're talking about safety, and safety should always be the number one concern. And so the pandemic really put a spotlight on this. And, in the nonprofit sector specifically, we always hear with volunteers, oh, we trust our volunteers, we don't need to run background checks, et cetera. But now, really, the spotlight is on looking at every position, whether it's volunteer or employee or board, and really establishing that foundation of safety, because in the end, everyone will benefit. And I think it was a wake-up call, candidly, and I'm just thrilled that the conversations we're having as a company with all various nonprofits across all sectors, and the concern that they've expressed, and any background screening company, really, compliant background screening company, stepping in and helping establish those safer environments from here on out.
Excellent, thank you, Kim. And what about you, Gretchen? What's the silver lining that you're seeing?
So this is one of my favorite subjects right now, because what I don't want to see for our organization or others who have learned things is that that we have the goal of being pre-COVID, because we did have so many learnings during that. And I will tell you that one of the ones for us, I think we're really two. I would say innovation and efficiency would be my words. We learned to be really efficient. Part of that was because we had different people looking at age-old systems, and we're like, why are we doing that? Can't we get from A to B like this quicker? Kind of thing. So, and that goes from everything from our volunteer application, for example, went from about 30 questions to 12, like what's really important here, kind of thing. So those kinds of efficiencies, making sure we were using our systems, our applicant tracking systems, that sort of thing, making sure that it was really efficient, and really shoring up that kind of A to B, kind of thing. And then in terms of innovation, for us, we really had to look at things differently. We still had to hire people at the height of COVID. Even though we had closed some centers, we still had to hire, and frankly, a lot of people. So we got really creative. We did everything from drive-through job fairs, where we literally talked to people in their car, mask and 6 feet apart, but we were talking to them so there was some connection, and those seemed to work. We had some success with that. We did no virtual interview. We are very much, I will tell you, RY is a very much in person, or was very much in person. And that is everything from the one-on-one meeting to the large meetings. We did everything in person. And so the virtual space was new to us. And we had the capability, we used Google kind of as our core, but we've learned to do trainings virtually and had really good success with that. You know, still engaging, but some trainings make sense to do virtually. Meetings, we love to meet. And now we've learned, okay, hey, I don't have to drive to wherever to see somebody. We can do that really quickly, you know, virtually. And to be honest, that's been economical for us with 9 counties, mileage and those.
Okay. On my end, I think we have a little technical glitch. It appears that there's a freeze there. So just a final thought, you know, on my end, because I do think this is an important question. You know, I just want to say we have all had to focus really on what is important and really what matters, you know, getting through this pandemic. And I would like to thank, you know, the panelists. I'd like to thank, you know, both Kims and Gretchen. I really appreciate the time and the contribution. I'd like to thank all of the attendees who gave their time today, and I hope this was valuable. I would also like to open it up to the attendees if there are any other questions. You know, we do have a couple minutes set aside to be able to answer those questions. So please feel free to let us know, and we are happy to speak to whatever else you would like to know on this topic from us. And if there are no other questions, okay, here we go. So a question, and I think, you know, Kim, Willis, I think this one might be up your alley. So how are you handling, you know, a zero funnel? You know, when you're not seeing candidates?
I'm sorry, I think that broke up just a little bit.
Okay, then allow me to repeat. So how do you handle a zero funnel?
You said a zero tunnel?
Zero funnel, yes.
Zero funnel?
Yes.
Well, first kind of roll that up and holler like it's a megaphone, like help. It may be someone or hear that holler through as we're rolling it up. I think the fastest way to handle a zero funnel is you need to get back with your staff, I think. Your staff and your volunteers, and start having questions about who they have in their particular social circles, professional circles that may be interested in an opportunity. As a recruiter, one of the things I would do on the talent team is I would go back to any candidates that were great. We just didn't hire them for the opportunity. So maybe out of a pool, they weren't the strongest candidate, but they were a great candidate. And let's reach back out and see if they're available for any opportunities. And if they're not, who do you know? I also think it's important to get involved in a lot of different social groups. I mentioned the different social media pages before, but I don't want to neglect alumni groups. I don't want to neglect any professional groups, because even with COVID, a lot of these groups are still meeting virtually, virtual coffees. They're doing walks. They're getting together for parks and things and doing walks. And I think if you can make the right connections and get with that group, I've met groups personally pre-COVID for coffee, and I've done it again through Evite with virtual. And I think it's a great way to immediately start talking about your opportunity and get it out there to some people that can start talking. Because I think the first thing that you need to move through the funnel is people interested. Even before you start to really narrow down that they have the skill set, you need to start talking about it and get it out there.
Excellent. And one more question that I will throw out to the group is, can you speak to the importance of company culture when recruiting, when hiring?
I mean, I can just speak as far as how Sterling goes and what culture and values are instilled, because I really think that fosters productivity. But we always put people first and make sure they're taken care of, whether it's internally or our clients. And really instill that high value because I think it's so important to understand, what people are going through this time and be sensitive to that. But I know if you don't establish a positive company culture and you have a toxic one, it's going to be a revolving door in your company, right?
Absolutely, and I think I know I would definitely co-sign on that. I'm sure Kim would as well. You take care of your people are going to take care of you. And if there are no other questions, again, I want to thank everybody for joining and thank our panelists, and turn it back over to Mac so that he can wrap up with just a reminder on making sure that everyone gets their credit for attending the webcast today.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, and I appreciate you all being here today, the panelists and the attendees, and we will close this out now. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me later today. I can put you in touch with anybody that you saw today. And if you need those certification credits, please complete the post-event survey for me. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.